Today we will have Francesco Busca, he did his bachelor in civil engineering at the Politecnico di Torino, and also his master degree there with 6 months at Imperial College London. And today Francesco will talk about the research topic deepened during his PhD cycle, just concluded. And he will give us some highlights about ecosystem services in the urban context, and he will give a short discussion about those. So thanks, Francesco, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, I will share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Simone, for presenting me. As you say, I will give some highlights about the research topic of my PhD cycle, just concluded. First of all, I want to define what are ecosystem services. They have been defined in a very general and easy to understand way from Millennium Ecosystem Assessment at the beginning of this century, in the period in which this topic has spread widely in the scientific world. And so they have been defined as the multiple benefits provided by ecosystem to population. And so all the benefits that people can derive from nature. 4 categories have been identified by MA, although currently there are other evolutions of this classification. So let's start with the first category about provisioning services, and so all the consumer goods that can be taken from ecosystems. Then moving to the regulating category, and so all those services aimed at regulating ecosystem processes. Then the supporting category, and so all the services necessary for the realization of the other 3 categories. And finally, the cultural category. And so the most difficult to quantify category as are intangible benefits, intangible services regarding the social human sphere. Let's see some example for each category. And so for the provisioning one, for example, food as vegetable and fruits, potable water, raw materials like wood or biofuels. Moving to the regulating category, we can consider, for example, the removal of air pollution by vegetation, the climate regulation and the moderation of extreme events, and biodiversity and pest regulation. In terms of supporting category, we can consider, for example, the nutrient cycling, soil formation, and processes like photosynthesis. Finally, for the cultural category, we can consider, for example, aesthetic values and sense of place given by green areas, for example, mental and physical health, and recreational values and ecotourism. After this brief introduction, let's talk about what in scientific research is defined as a multi-value of ecosystem services. What does it mean, and which are these values? We can consider 3 main spheres of ecosystem services that can be evaluated. Definitely the environmental value, considered as the ecological capacity of an ecosystem to perform the function of regulation and habitat for flora and fauna. Then, although, as I said, it's difficult to quantify the socio-cultural value, defined by Howard and summarized as the creation of spaces for recreation and social inclusion. And last but not least, the monetary value, often not considered by governments and public opinion. Let's deep in the next slides each of them. In the urban context, that is the context on which I focus my research, one of the main providers of ecosystem services is urban greening. Different possibilities to improve the presence of greening could be considered in a city. For example, we can find it on the top of buildings as green roofs or on their walls. Also, if the simplest form with which we are used to interface in cities are green spaces, which are also the typology that I have investigated in my research, according to the Sustainable Development Goal number 11. In the urban context, one possibility to evaluate these benefits provided by green spaces is using software to give an evaluation of them. In the next slide, I will present one of them, i3, that is a software suite specific for the quantification of benefits provided by vegetation in cities, and in particular the tool ECO, that provides information on the structure of urban greenery and on its effect on the surrounding environment. It starts from an inventory that can be of different type depending on the size of the area considered. And it's based on the acquisition of two types of input data, and so meteorological data and field data that can be retrieved through site inspections on the area of interest. It gives an overview of the structure of the urban greenery of the area and make a quantitative estimates of some benefits, some ecosystem services that we are going to deep in the next slide. Also from an economic point of view, in terms of comparison between benefits and costs necessary for the realization and maintenance of the area. In terms of urban water cycle, I relied on the tool Hydro of i3, that it's an application based on a urban hydrology model specific for vegetation, and it simulates the effects of changes in the tree cover on the local hydrology. In the slide, you can see the water balance on which the model is based, with all the different components in which the precipitation is divided among the vegetation and soil hydrology. And so we consider components of evapotranspiration, infiltration, storage, and different types of flows considered by the model. So let's see now some outputs from these tools. For i3 Eco, we can consider estimates of, for example, carbon storage, annual carbon sequestration from the atmosphere, air pollution removal, the avoided surface runoff thanks to vegetation, and the production on VOC and oxygen. In terms of i3 Hydro, it starts from some essential input data, like as we have seen also in eco meteorological data and hydrological parameters, but also the land cover distribution of the area of interest. And the program returns 4 types of outputs in terms of water quantity, the different types of flow, of surface flow in that area, the water quality, considering 10 different water pollutants, and the hydrology of the vegetation and of the subsurface. In the slide on the right, you can see some graphs taken from our paper describing the monthly trends of some hydrological components in a green area in Turin. Then, after having discussed the environmental value, the next step is to give an economic evaluation. So talk about the monetary evaluation. In my case studies of my project, I usually consider a scheme of benefits versus costs. Here you can see the annual environmental benefits that usually I consider in my analysis. And for each of them, there are the main components of the total benefit and also value, an average value per tree. The same procedure is applied for the annual cost. And you can see on the right of the slide an example of categorization of the cost that is the simplest one in terms of tree planting, maintenance, and removal of an area. At the end, an analysis of benefits versus costs. Finally, I want to dedicate the last minute of this presentation to talk about the third category, the third value of the ecosystem services, and so the cultural one. As I said, it is difficult to be quantified. Here you can see the framework developed by Millennium Ecosystem Assessment in 2005 in terms of categorization. And I tried to use it in my research project, developing a reference document in a survey form to be submitted to the inhabitants of the areas near the green spaces considered. For example, here you can see in this slide an example of the main sections of a typical survey submitted to inhabitants in terms of some socio-cultural indicators, and so recreational values, aesthetic values, cultural heritage, and also some specific section added in this case, for example, for the inhabitants of a small city near Madrid during my stay and during my mobility period last year, in terms of climate change effects, the knowledge of people about climate change and about the interconnection of climate change with ecosystem services. Then some questions about the commitment of the municipality to fight climate change and to consider ecosystem services in their planning. And the information retrieved from these surveys are added to the I3 implementation to give a more complete picture of the sustainability of the green areas considered. Here you can see two examples of paper that we have published about this topic. And before the question time, I want to remember next coffee break of our network. Melissa Atella will talk on 18 April about remote sensing for defining biomass features in ecomorphodynamic models. So thanks for the attention, and if you have some question, let's do it.
So thanks very much, Francesco, for the nice presentation. We have time for question. We have about 10 minutes for question. You can either raise your hand on Zoom or type directly the question in the chat. So please ask your question. Yeah, Emanuele.
Hi, second. No, I cannot remove the hand on my screen, but so thank you, Francesco, for the presentation. This is a very relevant topic, especially in the European Union, where now there are a lot of strategies and policies where urban greening and nature-based solutions are considered. For example, the biodiversity strategy, the new Bauhaus. So very relevant topic. And I have just a few comments. For example, the first is among the different benefits, I did not see the benefit at the building scale. There are also some benefit that can be entailed at the level of the building. For example, the thermal and acoustic insulation of the building are very relevant, especially for private people, and also can be quantified in monetary terms because you can calculate how much less energy, for example, do you need in summer to cool the building, and you can so translate in money how much is the benefit. Another comment, yes, about the cultural value of urban green nature-based solution. This is a very interesting topic, but also complex topic. For example, this is a similar question that we have for water mills, that in Italian is mulini, where we can install new hydropower plants, but at the same time, we can valorize and promote also the valorization of the cultural heritage of the water mill. But it is very difficult to attribute a value. And for urban greening, especially green roof, I found a reference that claims that the property value can be increased by 8% if there is also a green roof. So I can send to you this reference.
Yeah.
So you can sell your building with a price which is the 8% higher than the same building without green roof.
Yes. About the first comment, I didn't put the benefit about energy saving, but also because in my analysis I didn't make something like that. Also because I focused on green areas, and maybe it's more interesting to talk about energy savings in summer, but also in winter when we're talking about the building scale. But sure, there are softwares that can make an estimate, and also I3 can do it.
Okay.
Other questions, curiosities?
I would have a question about your model, because about the I3 model that you presented. So I've got a curiosity about the time scale of your input data and output data.
Okay.
As how you treat groundwaters. So if if you distinguish between saturated and unsaturated flows, and if you could give, like, I would be very curious about the model if you can give.
Yeah, sure. I3 eco, but also hydro consider reference here. You can choose in the software a reference station and takes the data about the meteorological data and data about pollutant concentration for a specific year, and so the reference is for an entire year with can I say data for each hour, so hourly data, and the outputs are given for the entire year that you consider. For example, in the software, especially in eco, you cannot take, for example, last year, because there are no data. Usually, the first available here is the 2019 now. And for the soil, I3 is based on some models with some algorithms that consider some default values about that. So I didn't put information about specific soil of the area I consider, but I give information about the land cover and land use of the area.
Okay, thanks. Other questions?
Yes, I see one question. And the meteorological data, so for example, precipitation, evapotranspiration, are an input data from the end user or already inside the software?
They are already inside in the software, but people, users can submit new data that need to be controlled by the software, by the people of the software.
Okay.
Okay, we have from Professor Viola, please.
Hi guys. Well, actually, first I want to say hello to everyone, and I want to thank you all of you for organizing this interesting seminars, interesting cycle of seminars. Well, actually, because I believe that it's important that the young community discuss a lot about scientific questions, but it is also important to keep in mind that we have to search for answer and clear answer to give to the community, not only to the scientific community. For instance, as regard to green roof and green infrastructures, it is really important to quantify the benefits, but scientific literature is full of answer of this type. So it is now clear that green roof have huge benefit from hydrological point of view in reducing urban floods and in isolating building and increasing biodiversity and so on. But I guess that the topic that Francesco is dealing with is very important, because as a scientist we have also to deal with economic quantification of this output. So it's quite important for us, for all of us, to try to put in numbers and to demonstrate to people how much green roof or all other green infrastructure are good for our cities. Let's say, for instance, in this case, well, it is clear that green roof they can have huge effect on flood reduction in cities. But if we don't quantify these effects, and if we don't, let's say, if we don't put a number on how much is the value of green roof, we will never convince, and we will never we can discuss with politicians regarding future implementation of green roof. So yes, I agree that the work of Francesco is promising in this sense, because we have to do a lot of work in order to quantify issue. And if I can suggest, let's say, an evolution of this work, I would suggest also to investigating the topic of structural investigation of green roof over existing buildings, because the soil moisture dynamics implies that we have a kind of structure over existing building, and in some case this cannot be feasible. So this could be a problem worth of investigation. Well, actually, again, I really appreciate it, and I hope to see all of you in Vienna in the next day. hope to meet you in person in Vienna. So thanks, and thanks
Thank
again.
you. Thank you, Francesco. Yeah, I will be in Vienna at the end of August. And yes, I think that collaboration with municipalities, with administrations are very important for this topic and need to be included in the future urban planning of cities. In fact, in some case studies of my project, I have collaborated with here in Turin with the municipality, and also in Boadilla del Monte near Madrid during last spring with the municipality to give useful information in terms of planning. Thanks.
Good.
Thanks a lot. We have time for our very last quick question, if there is. Okay, so
Okay.
I would say that we can conclude end the meeting here. So as Francesco, could you go back to the slide for Melissa? So in 2 weeks, we will have Melissa, our president, talking about remote sensing for defining biomass feature in ecomorphodynamic models. So keep in touch and follow us on our social media, so LinkedIn and Twitter, and you will receive further updates on this. So thank you very much for joining, and see you in 2 weeks, and have a nice day.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.